Following on from the main mast step and the foremast step, we're now going to look at the mizzen mast step, which is at the back. And there were some comments made that I thought I would highlight as good practice for making these very small pieces. When you have a nice blank piece of wood, this is really the only time that you can establish lines on the piece that will help when you've cut it out to hold it in a vise when you're either sanding or if you're milling the piece, lining it up on the milling vise. The first thing I do is draw out, taken from the book, a little piece on a transparent paper, which I'll line up and simply put some general marks of where I would like these lines to be. Obviously, I'm going to line the top up. We have to cut a hole or drill a hole around the center. We have to draw a line where it meets the keelson, and of course on the bottom of the. So these are just some general marks, and we're going to just say that the center is approximately here. And to get the lines, it'll be almost impossible to try and fit a square on this. So to get the lines, the simplest way I do use the caliper, and I score the caliper a few times like that, and I'll move it up to the next piece that I want to take a drawing on, take a line on, and again, and finally the third part, the third line. And then we can simply take a pencil and go along that line and create nice straight parallel lines to the piece. In terms of the center line, you have a choice. You could simply mark out the center anywhere you want and use that to line up. What I like to do is, in the case of this piece, the keelson is 12 inches, and for me to establish the thickness of the keelson, I'll simply put the caliper at 1 inch and draw a line. So we just need to move the caliper down to 1.25, and we can either draw the line and use the square, or you could also have just scribed it. Then if we want to get the center of that line, we can come back to 1.125. So now we line up this little piece that they cut out. Make sure you line up the top properly, and you can now just simply draw it in. And so we can take this to the scroll saw and cut the piece out. I know David doesn't like power tools as much as Greg does, and I haven't shown them for quite a while. So I thought I'd just quickly go through, very short. I have to say, the more I use the scroll saw, the more accurate I get. And of course I've tightened up my milling machine, and that's really made my life so much easier, because it really does give you fantastic cuts. Of course, the only thing you can use the milling machine for on these pieces is to flatten the top and the bottom piece. The rest of it is back down to files, and that New York file I had from 2 weeks ago, which is a rasp, is really earning its weight, and that little square that you just saw, again, also invaluable. I know I've said this a few times, but the most important thing with the file, whether you're using this or you're using a machine, is to take little bits off. and I tend to use lines on the piece and sand down to those lines and then check and double check. And this is one of the few times that I actually have made a mistake and had to throw away a piece. This is actually an original piece with none of the mahogany pieces that I had before. In terms of drilling the holes for the pins, again, I use the vernier caliper to establish exactly where each of those holes go. Use a pointy instrument to have the starter hole, and the accuracy of my tree nails has really improved tremendously since I started doing this. Another technique that I've developed is to only use one tree nail when putting a piece on the model. I found the act of trying to put in multiple tree nails, the odds of me making a mistake were pretty high. And if I had one centering tree nail in particular, I could move the piece around without any problem. All the mast steps are now complete, and we can now move on to the aft crutch and the two breast hooks. The drawing is there to scale, and I take my templates off of that with some heavy paper, trace it onto the stock, and this tends to be slightly oversized stock, a little thicker than the 8.5 inches required. And a very worrying thing is taking place. I'm making these pieces without any error, and based on my past experience, it's beginning to worry me. Anyway, moving on, a lot of faith that I'm getting it right. And anyway, these pieces are really very easy to take out should that problem raise its head. The only piece that really gave me trouble was the upper breast hook, where when I made it exactly to scale, it actually came just above the deck beams. And so that worried me, and I actually, as you can see from the drawing, made it quite a bit smaller so it would fit below any beam that came there. That's not probably as big an issue as made out to be, because when you read the book, you realize that these are approximate, they're not exact. And of course, there will be slight differences in the model between what's written in the book and what was actually built. I would guess that in fact it's the same thing with real ships, that not every ship, every one of the Swan ships built was identical. There would have been some variation. When I went to put the aft crutch, in fact the same thing happened. When I first made the piece, it stuck above the lower deck line, so I had to reduce that piece as well. But in the end, I think it worked out pretty good. I got all the pieces in and off on what is 4 weeks vacation, so I need a good rest. See you when I get back.